Batch processing in FCS Express is a tool to help you complete actions and export reports in an efficient manner. To get started talking about batch processing, we must talk about our data list and how we manage our data files. We are able to add panels so that we can have files that are controls or remain stationary throughout our analysis as these other data files are changing, as well as looking at our data files individually. So a single data file is one iteration or moves through the data analysis singularly. We can also introduce panels that have multiple data files, so you have a lot of versatility on how you want to work moving your data files through your analysis strategy. Here we've set the controls, a single control, and then we have each of our other data files set as a single iteration. When batch processing is used, one data file will be moved through the analysis strategy. When we go to the Batch and Export tab and click on Actions and Reports, you'll see here we have a lot of different options for you to use. Now, once they've been created with a layout, they will be saved. Under Actions, you can print, save layout, save to PowerPoint, save to PDF, save as a picture, publish a layout, save gating ML, save spreadsheet to Excel. We also have a folder option and a Prism project folder. And we have reports like Export to Luma, internal spreadsheet. We have Prism projects that appear when you click on the Prism project folder. And then you have Export to Excel in two varieties, the column mode and the cell mode, Word report, PDF form, text report. Now, anytime that we add an action or report, we do have an edit window that opens. Here we're able to determine where we're going to save it by clicking on this folder icon. We can also introduce token to add some additional information to the file name. We can ask for confirmation before overriding an existing file so that there is no way that an existing file is overwritten without your permission. We can also create an output folder if one does not exist. With our data link for the save action, we can save it as no link, which is a template file, a link, which recalls the pathway to our data files, or embedded, which saves the data file or data files displayed on the layout at the time of the save within that layout file. We can save only at the end of this batch. Once these have set, we can click OK. I haven't changed anything, so I'll go ahead and click Cancel here. For our export to PowerPoint, we can designate things like including the master slide, opening after saving. We can also determine the quality of the export, the mode. We can tell it a page range, all pages, current page, or a specific page. We can also do iteration options. We can save each iteration or each data set, data file, however we have worked our panel into a separate presentation. We can combine them all into the same presentation. We can start with an empty file, which means we're starting with something that is brand new, or we can append. This is especially powerful when we're doing longitudinal studies. We can save into the same existing PowerPoint so that at the end of the study we have all of our files, all of our information collected into one place. For the output file actions, we're able to append if we have that file already created and we're just adding data as we go. If we're saving to a new data file, we have that option to add the folder, add some tokens for additional information. We can again ask for confirmation before overriding an existing file, and also create an output folder if one does not exist. One report that I really appreciate and the ability for us to do side-by-side comparisons is to do a custom grid under our export options. This puts us into the position where we can crop to a content. So on my comparisons page, I have a single plot. It will crop to that single plot and will create a custom grid. When I click on this ellipsis button, we'll see that I can also customize this grid to designate how many columns and rows are necessary to display my data properly. Now, it's important to consider that the number of columns and rows will change the size of the plots displayed. We can also change the order, so instead of going horizontally, we can go vertically. We can also change the gap mode, auto, minimal, manual. And then once we have those settings selected, we can go ahead and click OK. We have the same option for page ranges, and we have the iteration options, append options, output file options like we saw before. And we also have that additional option to open file after saving. It's just down at the bottom for the PDF action. Once those are set, we can go ahead and click OK. For the Excel sheet, this actually starts off as blank, and statistics and information can be dragged into the Excel sheet by simply selecting a plot and then dragging it over. I'm going to go ahead and add a statistic token here and select our file name. and click OK. Now once we've added statistics, they're not stuck in one position. If we find we put it in the wrong order, we can drag and drop to a new location or new order in the list of statistics here. We can also double click on a statistic and click on the field option to make sure that we can introduce a name for the column that would be appropriate or best for our research. In our File, Options, Statistics, and statistic naming options designate how we're going to add names and define these more thoroughly as well. But if you like to customize, we can use that field option. Once we have statistics added here, we can also copy. So if we wanted to use the same plots or the same populations and maybe just change what the statistic is reporting, maybe instead of percent of sales here, we'll do events, I can just do a copy. I can do a paste, and then when I double click, I can format this and go to statistic. Instead of selecting that percent of all sales, I'll do number of events. So there are some shortcuts to get all of the statistics reported into your Excel spreadsheet. We do have additional resources for Prism projects and exports to Luma. Those will not be discussed in this batch processing video. A quick note about this folder, which can be very useful, is in this folder we can set the checkbox by checking it manually, or we can set a condition. So if there are certain things that we would like to happen based on a condition for our batch processing actions, we can insert a token here. If this token is true, the box will be checked and it will be run during batch processing. If the statement is false, the box will remain unchecked, and then those things will not be created during batch processing. We'll go ahead and reset that back to set the checkbox by checking it manually, and then click OK. After we've established our batch actions and reports, we can look at our batch processing options. Here we will be able to determine how many iterations should be performed during batch processing, always perform this many iterations and set that manually, or automatically perform the maximum possible. We can also set the increment value. So if we weren't using a panel, we can also increase the increment, so every other data file, every third data file is run through batch processing. We can tell it to run alerts before batch processing. We can also add pauses so that you can adjust gates, quadrants, and any other aspect of your layout before running or creating that report. We can unconditionally pause between each iteration. We can pause if a condition is met, so maybe we can introduce something like a viability measure, and if it's below a certain viability, the software automatically pauses. We can pause on flagged iterations, so a file that I've flagged, I can have the software stop on, or I can also tell the software, if I've had a trouble with a certain data file all day, to pause on a specific iteration. So we'll do 4 today, just as an example. And then we can tell the software what to do after we've run this batch processing. We can keep the changes that were made between iterations. We can restore the state of the layout. And then also we can choose what happens. We can do nothing after batch processing is complete. We can restore the original data files on the layout, and we can clear the data files. So once we've got those established, we can click OK. Now something new is we now just have one single button. We have a Run button. So if you are using any of the tools like Apply Iteration Snapshot or Manual Snapshots, it will automatically use the rerun feature so that those are applied when it runs the batch processing. It's just internal to this Run button now. Before I go and click on the Run button, I'm going to go ahead and move to my first iteration. The batch processing will always start with the iteration that is displayed and move through the rest of the iterations that follow. And now I'll go ahead and click on the Run button to run that batch processing, and then I'll create these reportables. We'll see that pause on sample 4 because we put that in the batch processing options. Then we'll be able to move this window. We are now able to make any necessary changes to make sure that our gating and markers and anything that we have done so far is accurate for this sample. There is no time limit here. When we are done making those changes, we can do continue or run to end. We don't have any additional pauses, so I'll go ahead and just run to end. After these actions are completed, the windows will open with these side-by-side comparisons, my Excel sheet showing the statistics that I exported, as well as my PowerPoint showing a page for each of the data files that we exported. I hope this video was helpful in getting started with batch processing in FCS Express. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions to support@denovosoftware.com.